Hey, what's up? It's Kit. Time for another video. Today we're going to talk about the relationship of the line to the drag of your reel. Kind of strange for some people, but believe it or not, there's actually a very good connection, and I'm not just talking about the pound test, okay? Before that, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Thanks so much for clicking that thumbnail. And if you don't know, this channel talks about the hows and whys of fishing. We cover everything from big game, ultralight, everything in the middle, including fly fishing. Now, this is kind of universal. This is something that it's good to know, okay? And this is something that you learn and apply any sort of fishing that you're doing, especially if you're doing, if you're using Japanese reels. And if you are in the States, I'm pretty sure that this would be something that would strike us odd, because as far as fishing is concerned, it is the pound test that we're talking about. And outside of the US, it's now not the pound test, okay? It's not the breaking strain of your line. It's actually the thickness. And there's the Europeans that use something like this, okay? So let me zoom in actually so that you can see here. Okay, now if you look closely, there's 52 or 0.520 mm there, and it shows you the kilograms. There's P10 for the Japanese system, and then there's 100. And we're actually going to dive into this and actually talk about the nuts and bolts when it comes to these things. Now, this is a very thin line. This is actually in the Japanese scale, it is 0.3, as you can see there. And this is 0.6 mm. There's a bit of confusion when it comes to these things, actually, especially when you're talking about, what to spool in your reel. Now, if you have a brand spanking new Japanese reel, which is actually kind of something that's the in thing right now, kind of get confusing when you're actually buying US line, because it's all in pound test. It's not in the PE rating, and what's written on the side of the spool is actually something that says the PE rating, okay? And sometimes it does say the diameter or the poundage, but if you look at the box, it's kind of different, and they use a different system. There's still a lot of confusion, and I want to also clear things up about how braid is rated in Japan and in the US, because it's kind of different, especially when, for the people in the States, it's kind of confusing when they see a rod and the rod says PE, right? They put the equivalent poundage and everything, but PE is always indicated, okay? And sometimes they only have the PE and don't really say anything about the poundage. But this particular rod right here has the PE rating and also the poundage. So yeah, I mean, different brands, of course, approach things in different fashions. It's just that for the consumers, kind of gets confusing, and this is something that we're going to clear up today. And after that, we're going to discuss how the lines that you use actually have a lot to do with the reel and the drag. Now, at the same time, what's going to happen is that this will actually give you a better understanding, especially when you're using braid on your reels. And it doesn't matter if it's an American made reel using the American system, or a Japanese reel using the Japanese system. At the end of this video, it's up to you to really decide on which system you would like to use, because honestly, it's really kind of up to you. But it would be good if you actually have an understanding of both systems. That way, it'll be easier for you to decide which one you go with and not go blindly. Yeah. So these are a few examples, and you can see here Sufix, which is a Rapala company, and we could say that they are based in Finland, uses a different system, whereas we have Varivas, and we also have Dangan braid from Major Craft. So all these three here they are Japanese, following the Japanese system, and we have an example of the Western system right here. First, let's zoom into this because it's actually kind of interesting how this is. Okay, so we have the diameter in mm and the kg, PE number, and then pound test. Okay, PE is not actually the size. Okay, it indicates, it just separates the line, because if you look at nylon, they have the same numbering convention, but obviously they're a different type of material. So for nylon, silk, some type of ropes in Japan, they actually use just the number. So it could be number 10, it could be number 11, 20 for ropes, it could be number 5 for lines. They all indicate the diameter. Okay, so this is actually a measure of diameter. And if you look here, just so it's not confusing, that's a measure of diameter. This is a measure of diameter. This is a measure of weight. This is a measure of weight. Okay, pause for a little bit and let me talk about this label, because actually it's kind of misleading. When you're converting kg to lb, you actually multiply it by 2.2. 37 kg in pounds is actually 81.5. Okay, and they only put 78 here. And my idiot self actually kept on saying 75. So don't mind what I'm saying. Just keep note that it's actually not 78. Also, it's supposed to be 81.5 pounds. That was example 1. Now let's go to example number 2 here, okay, which is the Varivas, okay. And with the Varivas, you can see right here that PE5 is already 75 pounds. Again, this is number 5, okay. So this is PE5, and then it's already 75 pounds. But you could see here that it says max, because PE could potentially go up to this, and this is the highest poundage that they've tested when they made this line. So it's not like US that says like 50 and then that's it. In Japan, they actually indicate that it is up to 75 pounds. And we'll talk about that a bit later. You see also here it says test. Now, every time you actually mention test, it means that it could go over. That's why they say 75, even if technically, if you go with the Western style, which is just multiplying whatever number here to 10, you have PE 10 to 100. But in Japan, they're a bit more, I would say, exact. Okay, so when they're testing out and they see that the maximum for their number 5 is only 78, then they'll record that. Now, this is the maximum. It means that it could vary batch by batch. Even if they're using the exact formulation, it's the max that they've ever tested for this particular one. Now, here's another example, and it says here 1.2. It says 1.2, 14.9. Let's get a bit of focus there. So this is supposed to be, if you're going with the US convention or the Western convention, this is supposed to be 12 pounds. But no, this is a max of 14.9. Obviously, it could reach 12, but because it's braid, it could over-test. This is the reason why they put that there. So a maximum for their testing of this is actually 14 point something pounds. And that's a very, very important detail to actually hold on to. Okay. Now, same for this, by the way. There's no difference. I just wanted to show you that again, okay, if we focus here, this is 0.3. Okay, if you go with the Western convention, this is supposed to be 3 pounds, but no, it's actually 6, or a maximum of 6. Okay, now, if you actually look, why would two brands have a different convention for grading their lines? The truth of the matter is there's actually no standard for lines when it comes to, or even company. It's a free-for-all out there. So someone's PE5 could be someone's PE4. That's the problem there. So when you're sticking to a brand, you know, you're sometimes even Varivas would have PE2 and you go to a different type. Okay, example, this is a big one, and then you go to the high grade PE, their PE2s would most likely not have the same strength. There's no standard per se when it comes to that. They've just practically agreed on a grading convention, but as far as the diameters go, it's a bit more consistent. But as far as the poundage or the power of the line is concerned, there's no standard for that. Okay. In the States, it's also the same. Now, here's the thing. And this is something that a lot of people actually don't even know. And I've asked this question specifically to a president of a very big fishing tackle manufacturer and in the US, and I asked him specifically, how did it come about that the US uses the breaking strain? And the funny bit is, I said that the except for IGFA lines, all those that are labeled test, okay, not class. When you have class on the label, it actually breaks on or before. And that's used for tournaments, and those are what we call IGFA lines. But for everything else that has test and everything that says extra strong, they over test. Okay, so what America does is actually, what's common for manufacturers and companies in the States is what they do is actually have a line that tests greater than what is indicated in the package, and they call it something else. So like, take for example, before spider wire, everybody there, especially the bass fishermen, loved spider wire. The 20-pound test broke at around 50. No other brand actually, could come close. Their 20 broke at 50 pounds. It could be that the line was thicker. If there's someone out there actually that could explain exactly why they're using poundage, I would actually love to talk about it. And if there's someone out there that knows why, email me or send me a DM. And then I would love to know the reason, because even asking big guys that have been around in the business for such a long time just couldn't have a concrete explanation. It's just, well, that's the way it's always been. There are two very different systems, and the US is using like the pound test. Japan, I think, makes much more sense when it comes to the numbers, because this number has been around for ages. This is also the same method that they use to grade silk. When we talk about the reels and how they're related in a bit, it would make much more sense to actually look at the PE number more than the breaking strain, because as far as the breaking strain is concerned, it doesn't really give you the diameter, which is very important. Again, there's no standard. If they say that 100 should be 0.520, and that's true for everyone, then it would actually be okay. But the only thing that's actually consistent would be the PE numbers. Okay, so that's it. Now, how is it related to drag? So a lot of people would say, like, if you have a 100-pound test line, all you have to do is actually just set it at 1/3 or 1/4 of the breaking strain of the line. And yeah, that works, especially with mono. We have an empty spool, just as an example for our spinning, and we have this. Now, as you can see here, okay, let's zoom in a bit so that you can see, and then we focus. There we go. Now, as you can see here, there's actually some rings, okay? There's rings there. It indicates the amount of line, at least to give you an idea. If it's exposed, then you'll know that you have half a spool, 3/4 going towards empty and all that. And the OSHA jigger also has something similar, Stellas and all that. So, some of them, or some of the better reels, actually have them. Now, why is diameter important? Okay. The diameter actually tells you exactly how much line you have. Not only that, but the thicker your line is, the faster your arbor or your stack of line actually drops. And when it drops rapidly, your drag actually increases. So take for example, if I set this at 7, and then when it reaches the halfway mark right here, the drag is not going to be 7 anymore. Okay, so if you're going with pound test and your line is actually thicker than is recommended to be spooled on your reel, what happens is that it could be that your arbor or your stack of line actually goes down quite fast. So the thicker the diameter of your line, the faster your line stack is gonna go down, and the faster your drag is going to spike up. And this is why there are some reels where the recommended line is actually thin. Now, here's an example, okay? This is an OSHA jigger. Now, I actually mentioned that it's according to use. So as far as the use is concerned, it's totally different. So the drags and the design of the drags is different. But with this is meant to be fished in deep water. So when you drop your line, and you're already at the depth that you want to fish, when you set your drag at 7 kg when the reel is full, it's not going to be 7 kg anymore. Okay, I'm going to be discussing the math of that in the next video, and I promise this is going to be a 3-part series. The next one would be the one that would actually talk about the nerdy stuff. The thinner your line, the more you'd be able to put in, and also the drag does not spike up fast. It also depends if your reel is narrow or wide. The wider your reel, the slower the line stack is going to drop, and the drag is not going to spike up as high. So if you compare this reel, which is a 1000 size, to the 1500, all the difference is for these two, okay, as far as that the size of the reel is concerned, is actually just the size of the spool. If I'm fishing shallower water, this would be great and I wouldn't have that huge spike of drag. But if I use this in deeper water, the drag would spike up quite high, even if I set it at the same 7 kg, or it would be 14 pounds for our American friends. If I set it at that, I dropped it down to, let's say, 200 meters, this will have more drag than this, even if the line diameter would be the same by virtue of this having a narrower spool. If you ask me, it really does make much more sense to measure this according to the PE number more than, say, the pound test. Because if you go with the pound test, it doesn't really tell you the diameter. It tells you the strength, but if there's a brand out there that has line that's, let's say, 40 pounds, and even if they have the same PE number, okay, PE2, the range for PE2 is actually anywhere between 20 all the way to 40 pounds. Now, if you're going with just the strength, you're looking at, let's say, different brands, and then you happen to see one that's PE2 and it's only 20 pounds. And you would automatically think that that's it, but it's not. It differs from brand to brand. It also differs from the type or sub-brand of each of the braids. So kind of tricky there. And if you're setting your drags, it's going to be a bit confusing because you're saying that, you know, one is actually 40 pounds and the other is 30. And you might put the same drag on something that, let's say you're fishing 40 pound PE2, and then after that you tell your friend that, okay, you set it at 1/3 and he sets it, or you take your other reel, spool it up, and then you set the drags for the same as the PE2 that's stronger, then, you know, the 30-40 or the 30% 40% breaking strain doesn't make sense. Okay, so you have to actually do a little bit of math and see which one is actually best or works for you. Now, if you go with, you're already going with the system where it works for you, hey man, don't stop. But this is just very good information for everyone to know. All right, so I promised myself that this is going to be short, but I talk too much. All right, so guys, hope you learned something here. I had fun sharing, and if you have questions, if you have comments, please, and especially if I missed something, and if you know the reason why in the US they actually use the LB, the breaking strain as opposed to the diameter, I'd really love to know, so comment down below. That is it for now. Thank you very much for watching. Class dismissed.